Good evening, all of you. We're just venturing through the Stopping English literature, and in the segment uh, Romantic Age, we went through the different types of writers who belongs to this century and who had played a significant role in the development of the literature in the period. Yesterday, we have seen that John Keats was one of the important figure of the age and how he had played a different role. Specifically, his concept of a negative capability was one of the important one. Also, we have seen his famous poems which were dealing with uh, the different kind of subjects. Endymion, one of the important one, and On to the Gracious, on the Nightingale, and several other odes. Most of the time, question has been asked on John Keats, so as one of the important literary figure, we have to move on with his literature and whatever development he has made, whatever contribution he had made the romantic period, it was undifferentiate. Again, uh, the quarterly review and this black, what the name only, Black Swan probably, just forget the name. Now to the Nightingale. Yeah, egotistical, sublime. But what I want to tell you, the Blackwood magazine, the quarterly review and Blackwood magazine, how they attacked his writing and made his outlook towards the literature in different shade. We had seen this egoistical, sublime, and negative capability are the two important aspects which John Keats talks about. Okay, and we have seen his important works, Hyperion, on first looking into Chapman Homer, that is considered as the one of the best translation of Chapman's Homer's Iliad. Okay, with this, we also have seen one of the important aspect of John Keats' writing is his sensibility with the literature and also how he just depicted the poetry or the literature in a different way. That's the another stuff. Let's move on. The next person we have, which we're going to start today, is Thomas Love Peacock. Yesterday we were going to start him, but due to some unexpected reason, we didn't start him. So when you talk about the Thomas Love Peacock, his time frame is from 1785 to 1785 to 1866. Uh, he taught himself Greek, Latin, French, and Italian. When he was in teenage, he wrote poetical works, Palmyra, and other poems and monks of Saint Mark's. So as we see and go forward, we can see that is in 1812 he met P.B. Shelley. He met P.B. Shelley and formed a close relationship with him, with P.B. Shelley. Because of financial problems, he took a job in East India Company. That's some of his biographical details. But when you talk about the Thomas Lowe Peacock, he's best known for his essay called "The Four Ages of Poetry." The Four Ages of Poetry, which provoked Shelley's famous defense of poetry, which provoked uh, Shelley's famous Defense of Poetry, 18. The four ages of poetry are Age of Gold, Age of Silver, Age of Brass, and Age of Iron. This essay was first published in the journal Literary Miscellany in 1820. Peacock succeeds James Mill as chief examiner of the East India Company in 1836 and retired in 1856. He died in 86 at the Lower Harfield, and that was uh, his biographical details. In Nightmare Abbey, he satired on Shelley kids. When you talk about his works, these three are famous novels, but uh, Thomas Lowe Peacock is not famous for his novels, but he is famous for his essays, and specifically for his two essays. The first one is The Four Ages of Poetry, and the second and very famous one of his, that is The Last Day of the Windsor Forest. Hmm. Uh, Four Ages of Poetry, I would like to describe mm, more details about the four ages of poetry written in 1820. As per Thomas Lopcock, there were four ages of poetry: Iron Age, that is first; Gold Age, that is second; Silver Age, that is third; and Brass Age, that is fourth. And he described this age as in different ways. Just go and have a look into it. Nothing more to talk about Thomas Lubbock. So let's move towards the next one. That is one of the important period of the history of English literature. Hope you all got my point, and there is no need to describe anything else. Most of the writers we have discussed. If you have, if you want to read them, if you want to study these writers again, some of them, just let me know which one you want to study. Any questions regarding this? Questions regarding Victorian age? Romantic age. So I think there is no need to talk about the age now. Let's move towards the next one, that is the Victorian age. Okay. So what is the time frame of Victorian period or Victorian age? The Victorian age is the Victorian period or age is started in 1807 to till 1901. Okay, one of the major figure in this age is Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria is the Victorian age is named after the reign of Queen Victoria. Several movements and reforms took place during this period, which influenced the literature a lot. There was a tremendous growth in publication of periodicals, and also the emergence of the children's literature as one of the important aspect of this age. Most of the famous novel writers were associated with this age, and one of the name of these writers is like one of the famous name regarding age, that is the Charles Dickens. Most of the time we have the question asked on Charles Dickens in this age. Okay, चार्ल्स डिकन्सचे जे नॉवेल्स आहेत, चार्ल्स डिकन्सला व्हिक्टोरियन एजचा शेक्सपियर म्हटलं जातं, किंवा मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम आपण बघतो की त्यांना नॉवेल्स मधलं शेक्सपियर म्हणून ओळखलं जातं. सो त्यांचं जे ट्रिमंडस रायटर आहे, ही इज नोन फॉर हिज कॅरेक्टरायझेशन. वी ऑल हॅव एन आयडिया अबाउट दिस वन. And that's why when you talk about the Victorian age itself, it is very important to know about the details of the Charles Dickens specifically. We'll come back to it later, but I'm just giving you the overview. Okay. uh, रिसेंटली जो ट्रेंड आहे नेट एक्झामचा, त्या ट्रेंडमध्ये आपण बघू शकतो की ते आपल्याला क्रोनॉलॉजिकल ऑर्डर्समध्ये क्वेश्चन विचारले जातात. ओके, सो क्रोनॉलॉजिकल ऑर्डर हे करताना चार्ल्स डिकन्सवर मोस्ट ऑफ टाइम्स क्वेश्चन विचारले गेलेले आहेत. ओके, सो त्यामुळे वन ऑफ द मेजर फिगर असोसिएट विथ दिस एज विच वी मस्ट हॅव टू स्टडी अँड वी कांट निग्लेक्ट हिज contribution to the English literature is no one but the Charles Dickens. Apart from Charles Dickens, we have George Eliot, Bronte sisters, who were associated with this age. We'll talk about them one by one, and we will try to study them in the light of the literature. In that case, we would like to start, and I would like to talk about some historical background to this age, which had made a long lasting impact on the development of the Victorian age literature. In that case, we can see that uh, Victorian age is named after the reign of Queen Victoria, and she ruled from 1837 to 1901, and actually she was the first English monarch to see her name given to the period of her reign while still living. Got my point? Yeah. So she was the first English monarch to see her name given to the period of her reign while still living. Okay. Vast social, yeah, characteristics of the Victorian age, that is, it was vast social, political, and technological changes occurred during this age. Okay. Social, political, and technical changes occurred this period. Mm, it was one of the most prosperous period in the history of England, a period of industrial development and colonial expansion. The next key thing is industrial development and colonial expansion. Okay, so yeah, colonial expansion. These are the two important aspects when we just go and try to find out. It's also sometimes known as the age of reform. That is the name of this age. Okay, because of the plethora of reform which took place during this period. It was the age of democracy. Total background to Victorian age. Yes, so it was an age of democracy. The major democratic movement in Britain during Queen Victoria's reign was directed towards expanding the voting population for parliamentary elections. That is the one important step. Victoria came to the throne 5 years after the passage of the 1832 Reform Bill, which reduced property requirement for voting and holding offices in Great Britain and increased the number of individuals entitled to vote. However, the 1832 Reform Act still failed to extend the vote beyond those owning property. As a result of this, a people charter was drawn up for the London's Working Men's Association by Thomas Wallet and Francis Place, and in 1838, which demands votes for all men, equal electoral districts, abolition of the requirement that member of the parliament be property owner, payment for MPs, annual general elections, and secret ballot. This movement, known as the Chartist movement of 1838. Okay, so I would like to talk about some important bills associated with this age. First one is the Reform Bill of 1832. Then Chartist movement of 1838. Then there's an amendment in the Reform Bill that extended rights to all settled male tenants, and 1844 a Reform Bill which gives working men in the rural England the same right as those in the North. So these are the some important things. Factory Act as another important aspect. Okay, I'll tell you one by one. Then Mines and Collieries Act, and Collieries Act of 1842. These are the famous acts of the age. We have an idea about this two one. Okay, uh, these two are again associated with the industrial revolution. Okay, uh, when you talk about the Factories Act, was a major accomplishment of the property rights of the child workers. Under the act, a maximum working week of 48 hours was set for the children aged 9 to 13, limited to 8 hours a day, and for children between 13 to 18, it was limited to 12 hours daily. The act also required children under 13 to receive elementary schooling for 2 hours each day. That is the Factory Act of 1833. The day the 1842 Mines and Collieries Act banned all women and children under the 10 from working underground. Okay, so this one Mines and Collieries Act, what it has done, it banned children and women under 10 to working underground. So ban all women and children under 10 from working underground. Further acts were introduced following this in 1847 and more on, which were talking about the working class, specifically the condition of working class. In 1834, the new poor law was enacted, which joined together about six parishes into a union for the administration of the measures of dealing with the poor under the national leadership of the Poor Law Commissioner. The Sanitary Act of 1866 compelled local authorities to improve local conditions and remove health hazards. Yeah, most important, 1876 Education Act was also passed, which made school attendance compulsory for those up to the age of 10. 1876. 1876 Education Act. आता मी हे तुम्हाला का सांगतोय 1876 is made school attendance compulsory for those up to the age of 10. Okay, up to the age, not for up to. Up to the age of 10, and that's made all the difference. एज्युकेशन बद्दल आपण जेव्हा बोलतो आपल्याकडे एज्युकेशन ऍक्ट जे काय आता माहिती आहे आपल्याला की वेगवेगळे कोठारी कमिशन्स हे ते वगैरे वगैरे खूप 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 गोष्टी झाल्यात अग्रीड पण आपल्याकडे राईट टू एज्युकेशन ऍक्ट दॅट इज सर्व शिक्षा अभियान ते केव्हा राबवलं गेलं 2009 2009 पर्यंत काय कंडिशन होती ही आपल्या सर्वांना माहिती कुठं 1876 आणि कुठं 2009 hope you just got these points but when we just go and try to find out this one uh, specifically the literary characteristics of this age were associated with the different literary movements like Oxford movement, aesthetic movement, and pre-Raphaelite movement, or let's say the pre-Raphaelite brotherhood. So in that case we can have this thing. Characteristics of Victorian age, we talked about this one. When you talk about the Victorian age itself, we can't deny or we can't neglect the specific pre-Raphaelite movement. The pre-Raphaelites were the advocates of the theory of art for art's sake. Pre-Raphaelite movement emphasizes connection between poetry, painting, and plastic art. So as this thing goes on, Victorian compromises was coined by J.K. Chesterton, and art for art's sake got currency in this period. On law was passed in 1846 to keep its prices at high level to protect British farming from foreign competition. This age is also characterized by the triumph of middle class that we already discussed. Yeah, in 1859, one of the revolutionary things come into the picture. That is, Charles Darwin published his book, The Origin of Species, in which he laid out the theory of evolution. जर आपल्याला थिअरी ऑफ इव्होल्युशन माहीत नसेल तर मग खूप अवघड आहे. आपण ह्या गोष्टी तरी खूप अगोदर शिकल्यात, आपल्याला या गोष्टीबद्दल आयडिया असते पाहिजे. As per Darwin's theory, man was actually evolved from a lower species, and this was contrary to the teaching of Bible, which says that man was created by God. During the early part of the era, the House of Commons was headed by two parties, the Whigs and the Conservative, that is Tories. But from 1850 onward, the Whigs became the Liberal. Then in 1840, New Zealand became an English colony. Uh, let's talk about the Great Famine, Irish Famine or Great Hunger. The period from 1845 to 52 is known as the Great Famine. It was a period of mass starvation, disease, and immigration in Ireland that caused around 1 million deaths. Cholera pandemic occurred in 1848, which caused death of around 2,000 people a week. Crimean War took place in 1854, in which UK declares war on Russia. After Queen Victoria descended the throne in 1901, Edward VII, her son, ascended the throne, and Edward VII started Edwardian period. When we specifically talk about the Victorian age, this age witnesses or witnessed a clash between faith and reason. The term Victorian evokes the attitude of moral earnestness. The term agnosticism was first coined in 1869 by T.H. Huxley. Yeah, just have a look on this specific page, and then we'll move towards the literatures of the age. Before have a look on this chronology of important events in Victorian period. Take your time. Charlotte Bronte, that is the Bronte sisters. Uh, in the realm of the Victorian age, we can find several writers who made distinct kind of literature. They wrote uh, a different kind of literature, and they just come up with the new Gemini kind of stuff. Okay, Gemini stuff. So we know that is AI what is doing right now, but I'm talking about the different types of Gemini. Okay, so these writers like Charlotte Bronte, Ellen Bronte, the Emily Bronte, and Anne Bronte, that is the Bronte sisterhood. They have written a famous kind of literature in this period. And Charlotte Bronte, who written with the pseudonym called Currer Bell. Her time frame is from 1816 to 1855. She was an English novelist and poet, and she was the eldest of the three Bronte sisters, Charlotte, Emily, and Anne, as I told you. Uh, she first published her work, including Jane Eyre, under the pseudonym Currer Bell, that is the male pseudonym. Jane Eyre, one of the famous work, it was published in 1847. Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre is a Bildungsroman novel that focuses on the growth and development of the Jane Eyre from the rebellious 8-year-old orphan to a mature 30-year-old married woman. Okay, the novel is written in the first person with the older Jane recalling her life from her childhood. So again, we can call it as a flashback kind of memory. The novel is partially based on the experiences in Charlotte Bronte's own life. Charlotte herself was plain and small like Jane. The death of Helen Burns in the novel recalls the death of her sister at Conbridge. John Reed's decline into alcoholism and dissolution is modeled upon the life of Charlotte Bronte's brother Branwell. Jane's experiences as a governess are based on Charlotte's own years as a governess. So actually, she was studied boarding house and she became the governess over there. And the same, we can find some autobiographical elements of Charlotte Bronte in this book, that is the Jane Eyre. Okay, Charlotte Bronte, she describes 5 distinct stages in the development of the Jane, each linked to a particular place, like Jane's childhood at Gateshead, her education at the Lowood School, her time as adult governess at the Thornfield, her time with the Rivers family at Morton and the Marsh End, also called Moor House. Okay, one of the plot in this novel, Moor House plot, and her reunion with and marriage to Rochester at Ferdman. That's all things we can find. Um, Here also we can see that is the novel also contains some gothic elements for focusing on the dark and mysterious things. The episode of the Red Room, the Madwoman in the attic, the shoddy corridors of the Thornfield, all add to the gothic element. Okay. Uh, the Madwoman in attic, that is one of, again, with the same title, there is one book written by and Susan L. Gilbert, and this was considered as one of the masterpiece of the feminist literature. So here we can see the link with this one. Um, Same things we can find over here. Studied at a boarding school at Brussels, as I told you. She used to teach English while English teaches music. So these two sisters were working here. Charlotte's third novel is Village, which appeared in 1853. Its main theme is isolation, how such a situation can be born, and the internal conflict brought about by the social repression of the individual desire. So actually, this is the depiction of the social repression and the individual desire, the conflict between these two, how the one looked towards the society and how the society considered him or her. That is another level of hierarchy we can find here. Yeah, the thing here, Mitchell has written a biography of Charlotte Bronte, published in 1857 under the title The Life of Charlotte Bronte. Charlotte letters were also printed by the time. She had written to Constantine Hager in Brussels. She has written poems along with her sister Elise and Axel titled Poems by her, Elise and Axel. These poems were written in 1846 as their first work which goes in print. Main works of Charlotte, that is Jane Eyre and autobiography, one of the famous ones. The Professor Shirley and Willett. Just go and have a look into her Jane Eyre, one of the famous one, and sometimes Krishna Jana on this one because it has some uh, biographical elements. We can find that Muriel Sparks, the prime of Miss Jean Bordeaux, is the rewriting of the Jane Eyre. Muriel Sparks was one of the famous writer of the post-modern literature, or let's say the contemporary literature. And the first line of the final chapter is "Reader, I met him," one of the famous and very revolutionary work in the literature. The Professor is also poem by the Mr. Ezekiel, one of the famous Indian English writer. George Eliot said Villetta is a still more wonderful book than Janaya. There is something almost preternatural in its power. That's uh, the viewpoint of George Eliot. Okay, hope you just got the point. The second sister of this uh, Bronte sisterhood, Thomas sisterhood, that is Emily Bronte. Her name is Elizabeth. She was born in our town. Her time frame is specifically 1816 to 1855. We can see a very small time frame she has spent on the earth, but still she is famous for her one of the astonishing word of the age, that is the Wuthering Height. Um, writer होते किंवा Indian writers and English writers. I don't know comparison, but specifically writer ना, आपले काही काही रायटर असे होते की ते आयुष्यभर ते घराच्या बाहेरच नाही पडले. एमिली डिकिन्सन, वन ऑफ देम. ओके, तर विनोड दिस लेडी एमिली ब्राउन, ते पण असं होतं की शी हॅज नो सोशल कनेक्शन आउटसाइड हर सिबलिंग. हा, मग तरी पण ह्या लोकांनी असं काय लिहिलं आणि इतकं काय फेमस झालं हा प्रश्न मला कधी पडतो. किंवा मला असं हे ओव्हर हाईप्ड आहे का, कधी कधी हा पण एक प्रश्न पडतो. खरंच ओव्हर हाईप्ड आहे का, ते खरंच आहे वेगळं काही केलंय. कारण की इंडियामध्ये यांच्यापेक्षा पण भारी भारी मास्टरपीस लोकांनी लिहिले, पण त्यांना ते म्हणतो ना आपण राजाश्रय नाही भेटत. त्यामुळे बळी तो कानफीड सारखा प्रकार इथं पण झाल्यासारखा कधी कधी वाटतं, पण त्याला आपण काय नाही करतो. सावरकर म्हणतात तर मला काय द्यायचं. Emily took Walter Scott's The Bride of Lammermoor for the plot of Wuthering Heights. She has used the pseudonym Elise Bell in this novel. She wrote Wuthering Heights in 1847. This is the only novel by her. She is remembered for her lyrics. The night is darkening around me. The character Edgar Edgar appears in the both novels, that is the Bride of Leavenworth and the Wuthering Heights. Dante Gabriel Rossetti refers to Wuthering Heights as a friend of a book, an incredible monster. The action is laid in hell, only it seems place and people have English names there. Wuthering Heights, it has a Gothic genre. It is in 3 volumes, 34 chapters. Heathcliff is Byronic. Okay, go and have a look into it. Have read the summary. It will help you in your English. Anne Bronte became famous as an action belle. She wrote Agnes Grey, which has famous quote, and now I think I have said sufficient. Anne Bronte also wrote The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. That was not that much famous work, but just have a look into it. Okay, let's talk about the next one. That is Walter Peter. This is the uh, 1838 to 1894 was the time frame of Walter Peter. Was an English essayist, literary and art critic and fiction writer. His work on Renaissance subjects were popular but controversial, reflecting his lost belief in Christianity. As a schoolboy, Peter read John Ruskin, modern painters, inspired him to the lifelong attraction to study of art and gave him a taste for well-crafted prose. He belonged to aesthetic movement. Okay, we got time. We'll talk about these 2 to 3 important movements: aesthetic movement, then Pre-Raphaelite. Oscar Wilde paid tribute to him in his The Critic as artist. Peter's The Renaissance is sparked as wonderful new volume. It is Wharton and novel The Age of Innocence. Peter is referred in William Somerset Maugham of human bondage at the end of chapter 14. First work of Walter Peter, specifically Plato and Platonism, is a series of lectures represents the aesthetics who had withdrawn from the ordinary world and looked forward to nothing. Important works of the Peter, The Renaissance, 1873, Myers and Epicurus, his sensational ideas. R.L. Stevenson, established from 1894. Robert Louis Balfour Stevenson was Scottish novelist, poet, essayist, and travel writer. His most famous works are Treasure Island, Kidnap, Strange Case of Dr. Jackal, and Mrs. Hyde, Mr. Hyde, A Child Garden of Verses, famous work, The Head Trunk or the Ideal Commonwealth, 1877. Treasure Island, and then after this comes one person who is very famous in the Victorian age. The name is very great. That is Matthew Arnold. Overall, the literature philosophy, the age. Okay. So that's when we just go and try to find out his work. That's why he is called as the prophet of modern society. Modern believe that there should be seriousness in literature and poetry should be in a grand style. So he's famous for his wisdom words and grand style in the poetry. These are the major works of the Macdonald, and most of them are primarily to us. Okay, like Dover Beach, most of us have studied. Scholar Gypsy, Rugby Chapel. Okay, and you know, we all have an idea about is one of the famous essay, that is Culture and Anarchy. Most of us have studied it in our masters or in our uh, graduation. Pharisees, that was one of the famous one, but even he emerged as a critic in his career uh, because of his two works, that is Culture and Anarchy, which published in 1869, and second one is a essay in criticism. Okay, first series, actually it was a prose, but first series 65 and second series in 1888. Again, we all have an idea about his Sohrab and Rustam, another masterpiece by the class. Uh, Another famous poem by the, the famous hero of the age, on translating Homer's three lectures given at Oxford. Literature and dogma. Most of the time we had, most of us had studied this one. Literature and dogma was even today getting studied in the different universities, in different uh, places. When you talk about the myth to Arnold's poem, he's famous for his masterpiece like Rugby Chapel, Dover Beach, Discology, Pharisees, and So Rubber Wisdom. Uh, One of it, that is Pharisees, it is an elegy on the death of Arnold's best friend Arthur Hugh Clough. It was first published in Macmillan's magazine in 1866. Clough, in his poem, is portrayed as Pharisees, a shepherd. The next one, the Dover Beach, with philosophical poem. Published in 1867, this poem deals with the Victorian problem of loss of faith. This poem deals with the Victorian problems of loss of faith. It was probably written shortly after the visit he and his wife made to the Dover region of southeastern England, the setting of the poem in 1850. Rugby Chapel. This poem was written over 20 years after the death of his father, Thomas Arnold. This poem demonstrates Arnold's regard for his father. The scholar Gypsy is it's about a 17 years old Oxford student who had disappeared among the gypsies. It is a meditative pastoral poem that owes much to the classical poet Theocritus. And his Sohrab and Rustam was published in 1853. It is a narrative poem based on the heroic legend of Rustam, a Hercules figure from this Persian mythology, and his killing of his long lost son Sohrab in single combat. So this is poetry of his. Some of the famous poetry by the Matthew Arnold. When you talk about the Arnold's famous critical works, as I Culture and Anarchy, that was one of the first one, and Essay in Criticism was the second one. But when you talk about the culture and anarchy, it was first published in 1869, and Arnold's philosophical essay argues for a restructuring of England's social ideology. Arnold contrasts this culture, which he defines as the study of perfection, with anarchy, the prevalent mood of England's then democracy, and culture is inspired by right reason. That is the one thing that, about. Actually, he was the one who seeks to cultivate the free play of thought, the sheer desire to see things as they are, sheer desire to see things as they are. He divides human society into three classes. First one, barbarians, Philistines, and the populace. The barbarians who represents the aristocrats, the Philistines represent the middle class, the popular are the working, populace are the working class. Culture anarchy is also famous for popularization of the phrase sweetness and light, first coined by Jonathan Swift in the Battle of the Books. Sweetness and light stands for beauty and wisdom that culture adds to life. Sweetness and light stands for beauty and wisdom that culture add to life. So this is about Machiavelli. These are some of his prose works, sonnets, and several other ones. Just go and have a look in his works. The sea is calm tonight, the tide is full, the moon lies fair upon the stairs, on the French coast, the light, that is the opening line of Dover Beach. Culture and anarchy, Matthew Arnold talks about the touchstone method. Okay, might have studied in the your masters or specifically in your graduation. The stone method is a short quotation of a nice poetic masterpiece, the study of poetry in Nati. It was employed as a standard in instant comparison for judging the value of other works. It's talking about the valuation of the work, how to judge. So here Arnold recommends certain lines of humor that as touched on was the presence or absence of high poetic quality in samples chosen from the other poets. Comparison and analysis are the two primary tools for judging individual poet. According to this method, Chaucer, Dryden, Pope and Shelley fall short of the best because they lack high seriousness in their writing. Arnold says that even Shakespeare thinks too much of expression and too little of conception. And Arnold puts Wordsworth in front rank not for his poetry but for his criticism of life. And these are some samples. Harris's criticism, we have discussed these things. The next lady we have in this regard after Matthew Arnold is Elizabeth Browning. She was the one of the famous lady and the wife of renowned writer of the age, that is Robert Browning. Okay, she did not receive any formal education and was educated at her home along with her 12 siblings. Her first native poem, The Battle of Marathon, was printed in 1820, but she is famous for her sonnets from the Portuguese written in 1850. They were written in express her love for her husband. Total numbers of sonnets are 44, and this was a reference to the 16th century Portuguese poet Camillus and to Browning's nickname of his wife. Her most famous work is her long okay, that was like the novel of her. It is considered to be women's version of Wordsworth, the Prelude. Most of us have an idea about this one, so there is no need to discuss a lot. But Barrett Pro Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poems are dealt with the theme of social injustice. Poem Before Congress dealt with the Italian fight for independence. Casa Guidi Windows Poems Before Congress dealt with the Italian fight for independence. Famous line from this sonnet from the Portuguese are how do I love thee, let me count the way. I love thee to the death and breadth and height. With my last saints, I love thee with the breath, smile, tears of all my life. And if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. So, basically, she talks about the immortal love. And this work, she campaigned for the abolition of slavery and thus helped to reform child labor legislation, and that was considered as one of the monumental works of this lady, that is the Elizabeth Barrett Brown. In 1846, she moved to Italy because she was discriminated by her father and brothers for being married to Robert Browning and without their approval. She wrote The Cry of the Children. The poem examines the dismantled labor force upon them by the ruler. It was published in 1843. That's the another. These are some of his works. Aurora Day, one of the famous poems by her, written in 9 books. It was based on the modeled on the Prelude by William Wordsworth. Okay, any questions regarding this? Yeah. Any questions regarding this? I want to stop here because I just want to go the last today. That's why I'm just asking you. Any questions? कळतंय? शिकवलेलं समजलेलं?
you want to ask? काय विचारायचं आहे? Take your time and ask. We can stop for the day. Well, tomorrow we'll talk about the Earth, Lord.